with us. We'll get that started right now. Welcome, everyone. Thank you to UFA for joining us. We'll see how long exactly you can stay. This is my second time seeing you today, so thanks for being here. Please stand with me and follow along in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Rory, will you call roll?
Yes. Councilmember Glover.
Here.
Gettle.
Here.
Sperry.
Here.
And Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Robinson's excused.
Thank you. Just before we jump into the Unified Police Report, just wanted to make a note that on our agenda tonight, we do have, we have it stated here, Chief Dominic Burchett, who is the Unified Fire Chief. He unfortunately was feeling under the weather as of this afternoon, and we will be rescheduling that for him to come and visit. With that, Chief Thomas.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. I don't have a lot to say. Our ComStat report has not been completed as of yet, and that's what I pull our monthly stats from. I will tell you, we had an interesting week last week, and with the assistance of Public Works, had quite a transient camp cleanup that was up along I-215 near the Springs of Countrywood. On August 25th, Sergeant Richardson sent me some pictures, and I was unaware this camp was even up there, but we had 8 to 11 people that were actually living against the wall of the Springs of Countrywood, and I believe it was mostly where the trees had significant overgrowth and kind of created a natural barrier or a hidden area. And to my understanding, Glenn, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, there were about 3 semi-loads worth of just garbage taken out of there. And I actually talked to Chief Russo with Cottonwood Heights on a different matter and brought this to his attention. And prior to this cleanup, directly across to the east, adjacent to the UDOT sound wall, they had a similar cleanup, I want to say a week or two before ours. And I think likely there was a significant movement from one side to the other. But that just kind of points out the cooperation that we have with our Public Works partners. I had no idea this was even happening because I was recovering from getting the wing installed. But it was this is the second time where we've just had Public Works come to the rescue with us, and as a team cleaned up significant issues. So I'm just going to tell you, when this hot weather goes away, if it ever does go away, over at UPD in the outside bay, we're going to order some pizzas and have Public Works come over. We'll try to give you a day or two heads up and make sure you've got full crews. But and I'd like to invite the council and mayor and Matt and everyone over too, just for a casual kind of team effort, applauding the help you guys gave us because it was incredible. School's in session. No problems as of yet. I did get a call, as you may have known. Canyon School District actually wanted to bump up an extra officer in lieu of the DARE program. They're electing to go with a choose gang free with their choose gang free advocates in the elementary schools where we teach DARE. That's something they can do, and the choose gang free actually can either instruct that or teach the program to those of the school staff. So I got a call last week from Charisse and Susan Edwards. And that's the route they'd like to take. What that will do is take our school resource officer that's splitting his time between the middle school and the 5 other elementary schools doing the DARE program and keep him in the middle school. And that's something that Canyon School District feels strongly of. I'd like to mention, I don't know if you recall that we bought a drone. I know Matt, I've been wanting to show it off a little bit, and he thought it was for kind of a how do you describe it? Sexy, shiny, twinkly toy or something to that effect.
I don't think I used any of those words.
I think you did. That's how I recall it. No, I will tell you, though, that we do have a drone. We have 2 drone pilots. UPD has a drone program. I think as of right now, we have 7 in the field. And what our intent is to use them across the valley. I will tell you the very first night, our drone pilot in Midvale got his drone, and they're FAA certified, and they have to have, at night, they have to have an assistant pilot, which keeps a visual on it. But the very first night they did it, we had 2 apprehensions. One was by overstock, where a UTA, I believe it was a UTA employee, was assaulted, and the suspect left a track station and went to ground over by overstock. And we have video of that with the apprehension, and he had actually tried to crawl into a culvert, and I don't think we would have caught him. And, this is in the middle of the night, but with night vision, the ability to light up the target, identify, and even talk to the target, we were able to safely approach and take that guy into custody. The same night, Sandy had I believe a stolen car with 2 kids that ran up on Flatiron Mesa in that park up there, and were actively trying to, they're just staying on a hillside that was pretty overgrown. And the drone, you could spot them a mile away with the heat-seeking, the FLIR that they have on board. And it was kind of interesting because the kids, you'd see the cop car drive by the road on top, and the kids would run to the bottom. The cop car would drive by on the bottom, and the kids would run to the top. So eventually they got tired, and we just sat there, and we were able to take them into custody. But in the near future, I'd like to bring in the pilot as well as some of that video, give you a 10 or 15 minute, maybe perhaps in a workshop. It's very, very interesting. It's mostly for officer safety. I've been able to use it a little bit for our, to assist with even our Main Street project. Someone asked for some video. Actually, she's here tonight. And it's real easy for us to get a pilot to come out and fly it, and we just transfer it on a thumb drive, so it's not a big deal. Last but not least, if you'll recall, we had Aaron Bartholomew, who was our Officer of the Year last year. He just hit his 20 years, and good for him, he's retiring. He got a job offer on the civilian side of things. They're getting a good man, but we're losing a really good man. So he does not want a retirement party or send-off or anything like that. But today I offered him a non-send-off, and he declined that. However, I said I'd cook him a brisket, and now he's kind of on board. So probably next week we'll have something like that. It'll be very casual. When I get it locked down, I'll send you an invite. And he doesn't want a big deal because often these things are more like funerals than celebrations.
You know this is a public meeting, right?
Yep, okay. I do.
We just won't tell him.
Yeah. Oh, he knows. He knows how I work. That's really all I have to report tonight. I did see that we got our UFA brothers and sisters in here, and I know that the chief is unable to attend, but I think it'd be great to introduce the crew that's in here unless they accidentally, I've noticed before they'll pretend they get a call and they run out, but hopefully we can lock them down and introduce them. So any questions for me, council? All right.
Actually, I've got one.
Yes.
You said that this is the second time Public Works has helped with the cleanup.
Yes.
Do you know when that first one was?
It was probably a year. I don't know if it was 2 years ago, but it was on Fantasy Island down there. That's where a camp in the middle of where the ponds are on the south end of Bingham Junction. They actually had a rope and a raft, and it's like Tom Sawyer. They take it out to the middle of the island, and they had Public Works actually had to build a causeway or with the front end loader, and then just everything had been floated across to the center. But they came out there and did a great cleanup for us. I can get a date if you'd like, Mayor.
No, that's helpful.
Okay.
Thank you. I just didn't know if it was, a few weeks ago.
A year, if not even 2, I would say.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Moving on to the Harvest Days Committee. Oh.
Do you want to do that first?
Yeah.
Okay.
UFA. Come on, Schmidt.
Sorry, I was listening to the radio where there's a call on the freeway.
We'll let Chief Burchett know that you just replaced him at this meeting. You stepped up.
Impossible.
You claimed you were him.
Impossible. Actually, I was joking with Chief Larson that maybe he should introduce so that he could replace Chief Burchett. But So we're Station 126. It's A platoon today. It's our first day. I'm lucky enough to be the captain and the supervisor over at Station 126. As you know, it's your hazmat station for Unified Fire Authority, one of three. My crew, Cole Taylor is one of my medics. Colin Rich is my other. Stand up. Colin Rich happens to be third generation actually, right? So his dad is a captain over in Taylorsville. And then I have Sean Colesto. Bethany Bitter. So by specialty, they're hazmat technicians. To be assigned at Station 126, you have to have some level of hazmat training or technical hazmat training. We do allow some people to be assigned when we have open seats and open positions, but we're lucky enough that there are two of the hazmat technicians in the program. Bethany is driving us right now, and she's on the engineer promotion list, so she does a little bit of dual duty like most of us do. And then we have Travis. And today he's filling our open firefighter EMT spot. And Travis and Colin are both riding on the ambulance today, so they will be busy. As you guys know, it can be that way. Any questions for me? So there's got to be something. Chief called me up here, and so did the mayor. So I'm happy to answer anything you got.
Oh, we just want to thank you.
No, sir. No, sir.
We want to thank you for your service.
Absolutely. We're happy to be here. We're privileged to be in Midvale. We chose to be here, and we love it. So before I walk away, I can't not take the opportunity to remind you of fire school. I know that some of you really want to go.
Do we get to go a second time if we've gone once?
I'm going to have to say I'm going to have to get somebody that hasn't gone once at least. Right, Councilman? Before I get in big trouble.
Has it been confirmed if the union will be doing another one this fall?
We, so far, are not doing a second one this year. But I've promised Councilman Brown that we would promise him a spot for next year.
I appreciate it. Councilman Gettle also has not gone.
There we go. So I've got potentially 2 spots. That helps. So
Yes, but yes, thank you.
I haven't gotten this term.
I've never seen someone like take a double take on my name and like, oh yeah, I know exactly why you're coming up to talk to me at one of the Harvest Day block parties.
block parties, and I'm glad that you did, because now we can put names and faces with people who haven't gone. So I'm the coordinator, so I like it. I'm okay with it. So thank you.
I'll just quickly add that Matt and I had an opportunity to have lunch with this shift not too long ago, and it was great to be there, and just really appreciated you inviting us over. We need to do it again.
Well, as I told the mayor, it's an open invitation. If any of you would like to come and have breakfast or lunch or supper at our table, it's an open invitation. We want you to come. I know sometimes it seems like public servants are a little nervous when they get around their council or their mayor. But how else can you make good decisions in your city about your public services if you don't come sit at our table and we have open, good conversations? So you're invited, all of you, at any point. Just give us a little heads up so we know how to plan.
I just have to finish by saying it was fascinating to watch. We went in there with a group of, because we had both stations there, a bunch of people, and about 5 minutes in, a call comes in. About halfway through, a call comes in. Right at the end, a call comes in. It worked out well because it's time for us to leave, but we started with, I don't know, over 20 people and ended with 4, I think was the number when we left, because everybody was going out on calls. So appreciate everything you do.
Thank you very much.
All right, now, Molly, come on up for the Harvest Days Committee Report.
Hello. How are you guys?
Good. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Clicker next to you will advance the slides.
Thank you. Where do I point it? This way? At you? Okay, cool. So our committee met and just went over some really great details and reviews of how Harvest Days went. I am going to go over very broadly our findings, and then if you guys have questions, feel free to ask them. We are essentially taking all the feedback from the public as we start to plan next year's event. Some really great successes was the new parade start time. That seemed to be a great hit. Started at 9 instead of at 10. This year was obviously a little bit cooler, but in normal years that 10 o'clock is quite warm. It worked out that I believe it's Bluffdale had their event the weekend after, so we could change that. So hopefully in the future we can continue that. Start time, Carnival Row, which was the huge balloon arch section of the park on the west side, was really successful with kids. So we had carnival games, prizes. That was really, really drew in a lot of kids, especially when it was raining because it was covered. The festival tent was there for heat, but ended up being a great win because it was pouring down rain. Volunteer recruitment, thanks to all of them, went really well. We had, and all of you, I should say, we had a huge number of volunteers and everything was staffed throughout. Bingo on Saturday, I think that's hit or miss for people. We considered it a success. A lot of people came to the park at that time. We ran it for 2 hours. We have some feedback on that for time as well. And then the Mayor's Cup Horse Tournament was a fun addition just to keep people, doing different activities that aren't necessarily interested in bingo or don't have kids, was a great use of the Boys and Girls Club as well. The planning structure we had set up this year was the event planner, so Tanya, city staff leads, and then our committee. We thought that was really, really beneficial. So us as a committee got to make some great fun decisions. Tanya was really great about making a lot of those happen logistically, and then the city staff was there to support us in any way we could. That team we found worked really, really well, rather than us doing everything or the event planner doing everything, kind of a combination, and then we had city staff throughout. So we felt that was really, really beneficial, and in the future I think that's a great way to continue. It kind of spreads things out but still gives people an input. Future improvements, so this are some things that we would like to do differently next year. One of the big things was planning was a bit rushed because we started a little bit later in the year. We have our 2023 first meeting planned for 3 weeks from now. So that buys us a little more time. That impacted quite a few decisions, things like band, food trucks, things like that, because a lot of the things were already scheduled. New layout of the park. This was based on food truck feedback, vendor locations as far as like how far apart they were spaced, things like that, and potential expansion of that Carnival Row and kids area that was around the stage. In the future, we're going to expand that bingo time. If we keep it on Saturdays, we'll make it 3 hours rather than 2, just based on the diehard bingo fans. Staggered vendor setup. This was really specific to everybody coming at the same time, which got a little bit chaotic when it was raining and things like that as people were leaving. So getting people set up and leaving at staggered times will really help that. And then vendor time requirements, specifically for food trucks. We had specific timelines for them that they needed to stay. We're going to extend those. So rather than 2 to 7, we're going to require them the entire festival essentially until right before fireworks, just to keep more food there, more options open. There was a few issues with food vendors this year, some health regulations and some other things. So hopefully in the future we will be able to avoid that with a much bigger variety of food choices. A couple additional pieces of feedback. There's been some requests basically to have the block parties publicly posted, like where the locations are. That obviously will need to clear with legal, just because that are usually people's houses. So just a discussion of like how to encourage more people to have block parties and more people to attend. And then marketing communications for the public needs to go out significantly earlier. Again, that goes into how quickly we were working on a tight timeline this year. So marketing additional communications for all events related to Harvest Days for that. 2023, we have some really great big ideas. The few that would be new that have come to the table so far are a 5K or a fun run in conjunction with Baby Goat Yoga, something that would, follow the parade route prior to the parade, that kind of thing, just to get people more out and about. And then potentially a Thursday night activity that wouldn't require any city staff. So something like Frisbee golf where, you host, it takes 3 or 4 people to, throw out some Frisbee. That doesn't require any city staff. Just some ideas, something like that to keep it minimal on the city staffing part, but also engage that night of the week. That's where bingo was before, for those of you that weren't aware. Questions?
The public notice for block parties, I would feel like, regardless of what, we want, I think it would have to be up to the homeowner, because quite a few, since it was my fifth year, I think, I've had block parties where I was essentially not invited, right? Like this is a, sort of a private setting.
Yeah.
Somewhere I was like, you're the only council member that is allowed to come, so both ends of that, right? So since I've seen every home take it very differently, I don't know. I think that would have to come down to what that person wants. Then if they were like, yes, public, post public, maybe we can find something. But I think we'd have to very clearly make sure the host was okay with that.
On the application, when they apply, there is the ability to select closing of a street and things. I would imagine we could just add an option where they can publicly advertise if they want to.
Okay.
So it's in the discussion, we have not started, making decisions.
I just think everybody's on the same page.
Okay, I
Just
just
to be clear
want-
in these
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
conversations.
It's
I'm
not.
involved.
It's not a
It would
we
be
need
We want
to.
to make sure we're not forcing anybody.
Yeah.
That it would be an optional thing.
Yeah.
I'd hate to. I know a handful that would instantly call me if their block
Yeah.
party was
No.
publicly posted.
The idea I think would be to have it as an option, and potentially, hopefully, encourage some block parties in areas where they're not traditionally at.
And we've done the 5K in the past. I've participated in it 2 or 3 times, and I liked it. So if we can bring it back, I think that'd be great. The big difference between 2 of them, one of them I felt like 12 people did it, and one year seemed like hundreds, and it was mostly down to
Which one did you like better?
advertising more. Who
Yeah.
how early you got, or I guess the one that advertised sooner got a lot more.
Yeah, so we have significantly more time this year. I do have a lot of race directing experience, so we'll see how that goes. Not a must, but could be a fun run, could be like an actual race, just kind of depends on what we feel like will be great. Any other questions?
Good job.
Thank you. Don't thank me, thank them. They did all the hard work. Okay,
That's all you had.
that's all I had.
Okay.
If you want
Don't-
specifics on
don't
as we
go
plan,
anywhere.
you're welcome to come to any of our meetings. I'm happy to shoot those over to you guys if you want to come to any of the planning meetings.
Thank you.
So stay here.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
earlier there was clapping, and that is not normal. But maybe we'll hold off on do one shared clapping for this group. But we did want to, just recognize the entirety of this group.
Will the 3 of you also come and stand up here?
I was gonna say their name and bring them up and.
And then we can
Sorry.
applaud. It'll be
Yeah.
great. Randy will join. Oh boy.
And we're gonna get a picture. Before
Oh
we do
boy.
that,
With the drone.
I
It's extra cool.
I did want to say, though, that it's been brought up a couple times, but, it was last March when we changed the structure of the Harvest Day organization. And so the first meeting that this group had was in April. And so putting that whole event together in just over 3 months, about 3 months, was really something that was exceptional. And I think that it speaks a lot to the creativity, the flexibility, the intelligence, the ability to work together that this group showed. And I have to tell you that this is one of my favorite meetings that I got to go to just because this group was so fun. They might not feel the same way, but I really did think that this was a really good group. And I just, the hours that this group put in, started off on meetings that were every couple weeks, and then towards the end, it was every week, and then towards the real end, then it was like all the time. And there were emails flying back and forth all the time. So, I mean, there was just a tremendous amount of work that this group did. And it is really important that we recognize them. And one of the things I find most exciting about this group is how ready they were to start on next year, like literally the week after. Technically, Molly started talking to me about ideas the night of the harvest days. And so I just want to thank you. So real quick, so starting off, I know she already spoke, but Molly Signoretti, I'm probably
Thank you.
always butcher
No,
your
you're
name
good.
all the time, but Signoretti was the chair of the group, and we really appreciate you, how you managed, kept things under control, not under control, that's not it. I know, Mike Williams, crazy. I kid. She didn't need to control the group, but that you were really organized and kept things moving, and I appreciate that. United States sumo wrestling champion George Ferris III was the vice chair. That is right? United States?
I'm ranked fourth.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were, my bad. I'm sorry. That is true. But was just, again, always brought a lot of positivity and things to the meeting. And I have to thank you for what you did at the bingo. Your calling of it was exceptional and people really enjoyed that. So thank you very much. I'm sure a lot of you participated, won great prizes, but George is the one who kept that exciting. Rebecca was in charge of our volunteers and also brought a lot of great ideas to the meetings. And so Rebecca Pipkin, I appreciate everything that you did. And then, as I mentioned, Mike Williams, I knew Mike before this committee because he had a lot of different things that he was speaking to me about, and he had a lot of ideas before this committee, and that just continued through with this, and really appreciate that everything that you guys did. So I also want to mention that Lori Lloyd was on initially and was in the first few meetings and things and was needed to step away, but appreciate the time that she provided us. And then she's already been mentioned, she's not officially part of the group, but Tanya Hoops, who was the event planner, also was fantastic in changing this. We've post the Harvest Days event, we said all of our thank yous to all of the staff who participated. So we're focusing on this group, but again, staff put a lot of time into this event as well. And so with all of that rambling recognition, I just want to thank you guys for everything that you did. And if we can just give them a little round of applause. And now we're going to need a picture.
Oh, boy.
So if you guys could, we'll stay here, but if you could come.
Oh, I thought
over
we
here
got to
and stand
sit
in
in
front
your
of us.
seats and you had to come in the front. I thought that's how.
I see how this coup is working. Does this work or?
No, I just need a little taller because I'm going to get the microphone in my picture.
She needs to be Although I was going to say that was going to be quite impressive. Well, I don't know.
I don't know if they'll be able to see
I
us.
don't know, yeah. Let's see. Does this work? Where is it?
There's a box around everybody's face. I think that means I got everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you again.
Before they leave, I just also want to reiterate what an incredible group. I mean, Matt really summed it up nicely. But I think the fact that even as we were getting to the end, you've all said something individually to me about preparing for next year and having that commitment here. I just know as the city, we often get people who like to tell us their ideas and their opinions. It's a very small segment of those folks who really want to step up and be a part of implementing those ideas. And the fact that the four of you have really stepped up, just so appreciate it. And the fact that you're already starting to plan for next year, I just couldn't be more excited. So thank you. Okay. With that, we're going to move on to the public comments portion of our agenda. Any person wishing to comment on any item not otherwise scheduled for a public hearing on the agenda tonight may address the city council at this point by stepping to the microphone and giving their name for the record. Joyce, I told you that would be at the beginning of the meeting, and here we are. It's 7:43. Thanks for bearing with us.
I'm retired, so, I have all the time in the world.
Where's the mic at?
You'll be able to hear me.
And if you can just state your name for the record.
Okay, my name is Joyce Bidone. I live over on Twin Peaks Street in Midvale. And for the past 7 months, someone has been coming into my home every day at night and taking things. You never hear him come in. I'm saying him, I don't know. But in the morning, things are gone. Now, my basement is getting pretty empty. But the thing is, I call the police, and when I call the police, they come, and of course he's disappeared, and he's made the place where he was like nobody was there. One day I got really gutty, and I'm 80 years old. I shouldn't have been quite so gutty, but I wanted to know what was going on, so I went down there, and in the basement, there was a little girl going through one of my boxes, and another one sitting by the window, getting ready to hand it out to somebody outside my suitcase, the easy one. And then I turned around and went upstairs and slammed the door shut. But when the police get there, they treat me like I'm nuts. And one of them sat and yelled at me so loudly at the whole neighborhood. And he told me how dumb I was and how out to lunch I was. And it's still going on right now. They're heading to the garage. Last night, my neighbor and I watched them from my upstairs room, and I don't know what to do. I need help. And I'm not getting up from the police department. They just write up their things and move on. So, do you have any suggestions for me?
It's definitely not my area of expertise. I'm so sorry to hear about this. Do you know, I don't know, and Chief, I don't want to put you on the spot, but it's just not my area of expertise. I'd be curious if there was, in these conversations with our officers, has there been any ability on your end to be able to provide then that proof evidence for them to take?
Well, like I say, they clean up, and there's no evidence. You have to be there. I don't know how they even get in the house because there's guards on the, metal guards. But I keep hearing something pushed against the window when they come that must spread them. I don't know. But one night I turned the sprinklers on them and got them all wet. And they called whoever was in charge of them to come get them so they could go change. But then they came back. And so I don't know. Maybe it's... I've asked different police officers what to do, and, they just look at me. I'd like one of them to come stay. I'll move out. They can come to stay. But I need some help, or I'm not going to have anything left in my house.
Matt, is this something that perhaps, is Matt there? No? Is this just something that city staff could look into and reach out to her and get some more of the information?
I guess my question is there any way as a city that we could put some temporary cameras up just to see what's going on?
I've got cameras. I have 2 cameras, but they're smart enough to see. They changed the window they were using when they saw the camera up above.
Have you, and I know that cameras are not cheap to install, but there are, many cameras now are made for indoor use. And have you thought about?
Well, my neighbor's helping me with the camera. My neighbors have been very good. But I was just wondering maybe if more police cars could come down there, or I don't know what else to do. I've got to end it somehow.
So what we'll do is when you're done up here, I'll come out with you, get your information and stuff, and then we'll try to work on what we can do to resolve the situation.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. Okay. Are there any other public comments? Rory, did we have any online comments?
No, we did not.
Okay. Moving on to council reports. Councilmember Glover.
Nothing this evening.
Okay, Councilmember Gettle.
Oh, I'm up. Thanks, Mayor. I just, as some of you know, I just got back from Denver today, and despite being tired, even though it's a short trip, I'm exhausted for some reason. But anyway, part pleasure, part professional. There is a very well-known arts district in Denver, and I was able to check that out. It's called the Rhino District. And I couldn't help but notice that a lot of the mural feel in that particular district is very similar to what we have here on Midvale Main Street. Now, obviously, we need some more entertainment, some food and entertainment kind of areas as well, but it's nice to see at least the bare bones of what could be a very successful arts and culture and food district is taking shape on Midvale Main Street. We are not Denver just yet, but with any luck, we might be a little bit more similar to Denver. I've learned in my years since moving from Pennsylvania, you never talk about similarities to California, so I think Denver's okay. Anyway, that's it for me, Mayor, and as I mentioned to you, if you see me falling asleep, it's not because the information is boring, but just go ahead and give me a little nudge. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sperry.
There were just a couple of code enforcement issues that I raised with Chief Thomas. That's the only thing that I have to report.
Thank you. Councilmember Brown.
Nothing from me this evening.
Okay. I've got a few different things. So one is just an update on the overflow shelter process. I've not seen anything from the Utah Office of Homeless Services at this point, but it is now publicly available. Salt Lake Tribune ran an article on it. The one site that we have that I mentioned at our last council meeting is in Mill Creek. It's the old Calvin Smith Library. That is the location that they expect can host 100 beds, and we're still 300 beds short. So there's not been an update that I'm aware of on where that process is at this point, besides that came out publicly. With that, I know I had a good conversation with Nate and Matt this morning. I'm going to reach out to Mayor Silvestrini. I think this has been great how much of a collaborative process this has been from the mayors across Salt Lake County. I'm incredibly appreciative of Mayor Silvestrini being willing to host this overflow shelter this year. But I also want to see what can we or I and other mayors do to support him in this process. I know that they've already started to receive pushback from the community. Pushback specifically on Mill Creek City that weren't really their fault, but really it was the process of how all the mayors collectively went about this, and just some of the restraints we had in the process. And so looking at, if we were the ones taking on this overflow, I would hope that these other communities would step up and continue to stand by us in that process. And so I'm going to try to make sure that I'm doing the same for them at this point. If there's any questions about that, I'm happy to answer. The other thing is today we had a UPD Finance Committee meeting this morning where we talked about the fund balance policy. So UPD staff presented their draft fund balance policy. I had some major car issues this morning, so Matt was there in person. I was virtual, but Matt did a great job representing us there in the meeting this morning. So we, at this point, a draft was passed out. We'd still like to see some reforms, ideally, to the draft. The draft overall is in a good place. On the basic level, it sets for both the pooled fund balance and for the precinct fund balance a 5% minimum and Mariah, why am I spacing the maximum right now? Is it 15? A 15% maximum on that. And essentially within your own precincts, if you're over the 15% on your fund balance, then that would automatically go to reduce your member fee the next year. We're looking for just as much flexibility within that as possible, and so we are going to have our own draft version based off of that with some basic edits to take to the full board in this later this month in the full board meeting. But again, the fact that we already have that policy ready to go is great. We're just hoping if we can get some tweaks in there. But again, it's already we're happy that we've got this in already this draft in place. The other thing that they talked about today is the independent organizational review. They are looking at it's the IACP, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, I think is what it stands for. And so they've been working with them to have them come and do an organizational review of UPD. At this point, the board is interested in setting up some sort of subcommittee, ad hoc committee to be in charge of this process. I mean, really what we want is that this review process would report directly to the UPD board. And so then the board can also give oversight into the things we want to look into. So right now, I think we're really interested in looking at shared services, but are there more specifics within that? Do we want to look at precincts as well? And so taking that to a committee within the board, so they're the ones really going through that process with this organization. Their estimate right now is that it would be somewhere around $100,000 to do. They could start it pretty soon, and they would hope by about March it would be done. And at a minimum, we'd have a fair idea of some of their recommendations by the time the next budget season comes around. And just keep in mind that so the way that's been talked about, if it's $100,000, let's say for easy numbers, at this point we would pay 18.15% of that amount. And that's our shared services split. Are there questions about that? Okay. The other thing is recycling. So, and Glenn, I'm going to throw you on the spot if I say anything wrong here. But I actually had a couple residents reach out to me about our recycling guidelines, one specifically saying, hey, like I drive over to Sandy to recycle certain things. Why can't I recycle it here in Midvale? That was interesting to me because it was my understanding that all of our recycling goes to the same place in the county. So I've learned a lot in this process over the last week or so, and I know that the council made a decision a while back about only to message that we were not, essentially that we weren't accepting non-corrugated cardboard, cereal boxes, newspaper, paper bags, those kind of things. After talking with ACE, because those items were restricted for an amount of time due to COVID, I believe, partially, where they're mostly bought in China. So that market really restricted. It has since rebounded. And so the rest of the county is messaging that you can recycle those things because they are taking them right now. At this point, Midvale's the only one who is saying that we can't take those. It's important to keep in mind that all of this is based on a market setting. So 1 week they may be accepting certain items and the next week they may not. Ultimately, whatever we message is going to be wrong in any given moment. And as we're going through this process, I was curious because we were saying that less things could be accepted. Was our throwaway rate that we get charged higher amounts for, was that lessened? ACE looked into that for us, at least giving us the last few months worth, and they said ours was actually pretty high, the throwaway rate we had. So it didn't, in that small snapshot, it didn't look like we were necessarily saving money, and we're not having the same message as everyone else. And so, I know this council took a stand on this issue a while back. At this point, I'd like to see us move in the direction of going back to the previous messaging we had and sticking with what the county is doing, unless there are major concerns with that. Again, we've talked with ACE about this, Glenn, Janice, and Glenn, if you want to, sorry, Dustin.
I just wanted to say, it was nothing that the council took a stand on. Like, we didn't say that we don't want to accept cardboard or, I'm one who recycles literally every piece of paper that comes into my apartment. But it was, to my recollection, was them telling us that we can't put that out there anymore. So, all of this to say, I don't think it's a problem with us. It was just presented to us in a way that, that's how it was going to be marketed from now on. It's not like 3 or 4 of us voted to say no more cardboard in Midvale. I think we'd probably vote the opposite way. So I don't see that as a problem at all.
Okay, thank you. Last but definitely not least, as I think at least everybody on this council is aware, one of our local legends, astronaut Don Lynn, passed away over the weekend. I had publicly said he was born in Midvale, but then I was reading his obituary. He was born in Murray, but grew up in Midvale, went to school in this area, was a commander in the Navy, was integral in making sure that we got Apollo 11 and Apollo 12 to the moon. He flew aboard the Space Shuttle Challenger in 1985, where he spent 7 days in space. Ultimately, though, Don and his family have not lived in Midvale for many years. I think we all know that his name is definitely one of the most well-known in our community, and him and his family will always have a space, a special place here, and I just wanted to make sure that I acknowledged his passing and his contributions to our country. With that, you're up, Matt.
I will.
You go.
Yeah. All right, just a few things for in my report this evening. The first is that our typical way of operating the splash pad is that we're open from Memorial Day to Labor Day. We did have technical difficulties actually, on Labor Day that caused it to be shut down for a period of time. We did get that restarted. The splash pad was not operating today, but I have asked Public Works to make sure that during the remainder of these 100-degree days that we will have the splash pad up and running. That was posted on Facebook today that that the splash pad will be running for the next couple days. It looks like come Friday we'll have some relief in the temperature. Part of the reason that we do close it at that period of time, though, is that there is a significant amount of staff time that's required most days to clean filters, make sure the chemicals are in order and all that kind of stuff. And as we move into the fall and start to transition to winterizing or doing a variety of other sort of fall-related activities in our parks and open spaces, being able to not have as much staff time dedicated to the splash pad is part of the reason that we generally close it on Labor Day. And so it makes sense, given how hot it's been, for us to keep it open for a few more days. But it will be closing come this weekend, unless, I guess, they get it wrong and the temperatures stay up in the triple digits. I did want to mention, too, that we had met with the school district out at the middle school on last week. There have been some concerns about the traffic on Pioneer Street associated with when school lets out, particularly, I guess it would be both drop-off and departure, but we are going to engage a consultant to help us look at that traffic patterns there, see what we can do, and we're going to try to partner with the school district in order to address some of those issues. It's clearly it's our traffic, or their traffic, our streets, so we want to make sure that this is a partnership in trying to address this. I think there are also probably some other creative ways of looking at it outside of just us putting up signage. I think that there's probably other ways that the traffic patterns at the school could be addressed as well. But we're working on that. At the last meeting, we had some discussions about gang activity in our community, and one of the things, Paul, that you specifically brought up was that we should reach out to our lobbyists and start having a conversation about some of the issues related to juvenile justice. And I have reached out to them, have had some contacts with the Department of Workforce Services that we're starting to have a discussion. Clearly we are, it's important that we express how important this is. We'll talk with other communities about it, but it's clear that the breadth of juvenile justice issues is complicated, and we're definitely a piece of that. But I think it is important for our community, and we'll continue to work on that as we go forward. I think with that, I think that'll cover with what you went over, Mayor. I think that covers my report for this evening.
Thank you. Moving on to our department report, Community Development / Redevelopment Agency, and we'll hear from Nate. So even though you're Assistant City Manager, you don't get away from these reports.
No, that was one of the whole benefits, is that I was going to get away from these reports, but here I am. So I just have a couple of quick things. These are just updates that I wanted to give. In both community development and the RDA, we've got a lot of projects going on in addition to just the day-to-day work. So a lot of thanks to the staff for wearing a lot of different hats and being skilled in a lot of different areas to make all of this work. But just going over some of these, I know it's been a while since I've talked about the canal study, but we finally got that RFP out, so we'll be selecting a consultant soon, moving forward with that canal study. That came from a UDOT grant that we received. Same thing with, we got a grant from WFRC for Main Street urban design, which is designing the lights, the landscaping, the wayfinding, the parking for the Main Street design that we want. That RFP went out. We got several consultants, really happy with the quality of the consultants, which I'm glad that Midvale is able to attract some of those high quality consultants. We've got that narrowed down to 2 that we're going to kind of interview and make a decision between. But just kind of going off of Councilmember Gettle's comments, one of the things, they both have a Utah presence, but the 2 that we're kind of deciding between have a very strong Colorado and Denver presence. And so they've done a lot of work on not only the Rhino district, but there's, I could probably name about 10 different districts that are in Denver or in the surrounding areas right there. Something that we want to bring here, Denver is great because it is the same climate where we're kind of going to activate an area in the winter as well as in the summer. And Denver is a perfect model to do that, and they've done incredible things there. So it's nice to see consultants from really strong backgrounds in that type of design that Midvale is able to attract that really want to work on the street. In addition to that, planning has been working with WFRC, so we have a mandatory requirement from the legislature to do these station area plans. We have 3 stations in the city. We also have 1 in the historic Gardner Village station that is within the boundaries of the radius that we need to study. So we're partnering with West Jordan on that. But we received all the grant award from WFRC to start working on that. So we'll get those RFPs out, and we will be among the first cities to complete those station area plans. In addition, we got a WFRC grant to do a 7200 South corridor study. We're working on the scope of that, and that will go out soon. But that's another key corridor that we want to address. Another project that we're working on, the RFP is just ready to go out, and it'll probably go out within a week or so, is the council put money aside to identify the key entryways into the city and put monuments there. So that RFP will go out really soon, and we'll select a design firm to start designing those. And with the money that the council set aside, we'll have enough to do the design and then actually build some of those, as many of those as we can get in there, and then we'll just keep working on the other ones as we have funding to make those work. We're coming really close to the end of the State Street corridor study. There's a few more things that we're pushing the consultants to get in there that were required, so we will be very close to having that and presenting that to the community and to the council. In terms of future grants, we do have a lot of grants out, but 4 of them that staff put together and applied for are these county, they're called TRCC grants, which are tourism, recreation, culture, and convention centers. Obviously, we're not going to work on the convention center, but so we put in 4 grants for that. One of them is for funding for this Main Street marketing. So once we go through this process that we talked about and pick a marketing campaign and have that all developed, it would be money to actually do the marketing so that we could start, putting advertising out and doing placements for that, which would be the next step in that. Also, another grant was for some of the City Hall Plaza, food truck plaza, so some grant money to help offset. There's sufficient money set aside to do that, but it fits really, really nicely into the tourism, recreation, and culture category, and they actually used that plaza as an example of what a good grant would be, so we kind of felt that we had to turn in a grant for that. So we'll see how that goes. Also, once we have the lighting study done, there'll be infrastructure costs associated with that. So another grant that was submitted was for actually doing some of the improvements on Main Street, especially the lighting and the wayfinding, which will be key in the beginning. And then the fourth one, not related to Main Street, is once the canal study is done, then we'll have infrastructure improvements there. So it's infrastructure money to actually put into making some of those improvements on the canal. We already have a grant that's been awarded by UDOT that has some large matching costs. So this grant would be really helpful in providing some matching costs so that we can get that, maybe not done, but we can get some key elements of that canal trail started. So Kate and I will be talking to the county, the board that does the selection committee for these grants on Friday, and kind of pitching the different ideas behind these and how they will promote tourism, recreation, and culture in Salt Lake Valley and in Midvale specifically. Also from the RDA, a lot of good planning moving on the car show, which will be coming up in the beginning of October. The trick or treat again on Main Street, right near Halloween. It'll be on the Saturday before, and then the light up Main Street event, Christmas tree lighting. Some really good planning going into that. I think expanding on the success that we had last year to a very large degree. I think the staff has put together a lot of different elements that will really make those events be really successful and come to life even more. So we're really excited about that. And I think the council will be, obviously we'll have more details on that as we get closer to that, but we're going to start promoting those soon. So those are the things that we're working on. And like I said, staff, we have a small but effective staff in both the RDA and in CD and in the city that does just put on a lot of different hats. So they're doing all the day-to-day work, but they're still putting together the scopes of these things. They're putting together the grant applications. And then once the consultants are hired, the more staff time that you can spend with the consultants, the better the product is. So you really need to dedicate a lot of time to that. And our staff is very dedicated and just, does an incredible job moving around in between all these different projects and making things happen in addition to what they're doing on a daily basis. So those are the updates that I have. The last one I was going to say is that the CD and RDA are fully staffed, which has been a while since that has happened, and until me. So I'm the one hole now, and we have that job description out. We'll have that out for several weeks on the recruiting for a community development director. So, any questions?
Any regrets, Nate?
Maybe. I won't say, not publicly yet. We'll wait a little bit.
Thank you, Nate.
Thanks.
All right, moving on to our public hearings. for tonight. Item A, consider amending the Midvale City Municipal Fee Schedule for the 2023 fiscal year. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
Mayor, I motion that we open a public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, go ahead, Mariah.
This should be pretty quick and simple. There's just a few small changes. We realized that we did not have a fee in the schedule to rent the park field, the city park field, and had someone interested in that. We can't charge that until it's in the fee schedule. So I did the math to figure out what that costs and have added that in at $50 for resident, $65 for non-resident for a half day, and $100 for resident and $130 for non-resident for a full day with a $500 deposit. And then from Public Works, I just got some updated fees for the cemetery. So just noting that the sale price of burial lots is for the same for infants and adults, adding resident and adding non-resident fees and adjusting some of the resident fees for the cost of grave openings and closing. And then per the resolution you guys passed last week, the cost of having an upright headstone grave marker. And that is all of the changes. Questions?
I just had a real quick question. The city park, the $500 deposit, I feel like that might be cost prohibitive to a lot of people. Was there a reason? Because I know I've rented myself the community center, and it was like $200
For the-
or so.
Yeah, we can adjust that. I think damage to the field is the issue, or sprinkler. I don't know. Sometimes people, if they hit a sprinkler line or something like that, can cause an issue. But we can, if you want to have it more equal to the. Let's see, what is the deposit for the community center? $200. We can do that, and you can just change it in the motion. I'm fine with that.
I mean, that seems fair to
Yeah.
me. I just
That makes more sense. I'm fine with
a
that.
lot of people who might want to rent the city park, it's because, it's a cheaper option than renting a more formal area, and then to be like, well, we're going to take $500 out of your account, and you'll get it back.
Yep.
Can be very cost prohibitive for a lot of people.
Yeah. Why don't you just change that in the motion? And I'm really comfortable with that.
Is that okay to do? Is any great? Glenn, when you lean in, it worries me when you're leaning like that.
They'll make it simpler for the people who are renting it, or like our side of things as well.
So if we could change that to 200
Yep.
instead of 500.
Yeah, if you just add that in the motion, then that should be
Okay.
fine. And there's a sample motion.
Any other comments, questions from the council? Okay, seeing none, this item is open for public comment. Are there any public comments? If so, you can step forward to the microphone.
Mayor, I move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? All those in favor of closing the hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Okay, that passes. Moving on to our action item, consider resolution number 2022 R42, amending the Midvale City Municipal Fee Schedule for the 2023 fiscal year.
Mayor, I move that we approve resolution 2022 R42, amending the Midvale City fiscal year 2023 fee schedule with the amended $200 city park deposit as discussed.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second?
Motion and a second. Any discussion on that? Rory, will you call roll?
Yes. Councilmember Sperry.
Aye.
Glover.
Aye.
Brown.
Yes.
And Gettle.
Yes.
Okay, that passes. Thank you. Moving on to item B, consider final plat for Prestige Estates number 2 to convert a duplex into a twin home located at 481 to 483 East Acoma Road. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
Mayor, I motion we open the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Any opposed? Okay, go ahead, Bendeline.
Mayor and members of the City Council, this is a pretty simple project. The developer is sitting in the audience if you have any questions for him. This is an existing structure that's currently a duplex, so there would be 2 renters in there. And the subdivision plat that you see here puts a party line, a party wall into the building so that 2 different parties can own the building. So this is one tool to increase home ownership in Midvale. And our municipal code actually has that codified. It specifically addresses this case, where you have an existing single-family attached structure, you can do this. The VS staff have reviewed it and found everything to be compliant with the code. And so I recommend this motion.
Okay, any comments or questions from the council? Okay, this item is open for public comment. If there is anybody in the audience who would like to make a public comment, you may do so by stepping up to the microphone. Seeing none.
Mayor, I move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Any discussion on that? All of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Any opposed? Okay, we are closed. Moving on to our action item, consider approval of the final plat for Prestige Estates, number 2, located at 481 to 483 East Tacoma Road. Is there a motion to approve?
Mayor, I move that we approve the final plat of Prestige Estates number 2, amending lot 35 located at 481-483 East Tacoma Road with the findings noted in the staff report.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Rory, will you call roll?
Yes. Councilmember Glover,
Aye.
Brown,
Yes.
Gettle,
Yes.
and Sperry.
Okay, that passes. Thank you. Moving on to our consent agenda, just one item, consider minutes of August 23rd, 2022.
Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? Rory, will you call roll?
Yes. Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Gettle,
Yes.
Sperry.
Aye.
And Glover.
Aye.
Okay, that passes. Thank you. Moving on to our discussion item of the night, discuss Midvale City Grant Program. We'll hear from City Manager Matt Dahl.
The discussion item of the night.
That's right.
All right. Thank you. As you may recall, during our budget retreat this year, one of the items that we brought up was the potential of creating a more formal grant program. Currently, we provide grant funding for the Arts Council, the Boys and Girls Club, Midvale Community Building Community, CBC, and the Youth Football Scholarships. Right now, it actually in the budget calls it recreational grants or something like that, but it's the football scholarships. During that meeting, we had brought up that there was the potential that we'd be able to open this up, allow for more organizations to submit applications, and provide an opportunity for the council to review those and make decisions in order to achieve the broader goals of the council. And so the purpose of the meeting today is that I wanted to just bring this back up. This could be sort of an initial discussion, get a few pieces of direction for you so that we could prepare a little bit more documentation and a proposal for the project or for the program, and then come back to you either in a workshop, or if we feel like we're close enough tonight on sort of that direction, we could even come back and start the process of approval. My intent is that I will go through sort of several different slides here, and then at the end I have very specific questions that you can answer, or that might field some additional discussion that might be helpful. So, like I said, right now we have about $135,000 worth of grants. $130,000 worth of grants that we provide. For over the last several years, those grants have been the grants recipients. We meet with them, have them enter into contracts for those grants, but we have not really reviewed and determined if there are other organizations. But this is who we currently provide grants to. The other thing that I wanted to mention, and while this is not the focus for this evening, and I think is maybe a worthwhile discussion in the future, is that in addition to those cash grants, we also provide space to the Arts Council and to the Historic Society, the Arts Council and the Performing Arts Center, and the Historic Society is part of the community center. And in those cases, we provide that at a reduced rental rate. So effectively, that is a form of grant. And it may be worthwhile in the future that we would have a discussion about, should we, at the end of the lease agreements for these facilities, should that be something that we open back up and see if there are other organizations that could better utilize that, or do we just keep it with these organizations? Like I said, not necessarily the discussion for tonight, but something that I think is worth us discussing in the future. When we look at a potential grant program, I see it as going sort of one of two different ways. I'm sure you can cut it 1,000 different ways, but broadly speaking, is that we've envisioned this as either a grant process that is tied in with the budget process, meaning that from when we market the program, from when we release the application, from when the applications are due, from when we do our analysis, and when we finally award that grant, it would be in a timeline that would match up with our grant process, starting in January, ending in June. The other way of doing it is one where the city council, as part of the budget process, instead of sort of selecting the specific entities that would be funded, would just say the grant program will have $130,000 in it, or whatnot, and that we would then follow, once the new fiscal year started, we would follow the grant program that the city council approves, and we would know how much money is in that program. Now, like I said, the benefits of sort of tying in with the budget process is that it might provide you with some of that flexibility, so that if there is, say, you're thinking it would be $130,000 in that program, there's another grant recipient that you want to fund for another $10,000, we could do that as part of the budget process and take it from somewhere else. And so it provides a little bit of flexibility in that regard. However, the downside to doing it as part of the budget process is that it is just layering one more process on top of everything else we have to do during the preparation of the budget. If we do it as a grant program, the positive to this is that all the parameters as far as how much funding is there and all of that is already set. But the downside to that is that there would still need to be that time for both the applicant, the city staff applicant to prepare their application, the city staff to review it, and for you to make your decision, which means that instead of having it as another layer during the budget process, we sort of extend this program over time and we go right from the budget into this, and it might feel like we're just extending the amount of time we're working on these kind of issues. So this is one of the things that I'll want to come back to and just sort of see if you have any thoughts on that. I won't go through all of the details on this, but this was just intended to generally lay out, if we were to do it as part of the budget process, sort of what that time frame would look like, starting with the promotion in December, January, making sure that we have the materials from the applications ready for a review during the budget retreat, and then moving forward with trying to make sure that we have the recipients determined by the tentative budget and then approved with the final budget. If we go with the program that is outside the budget process, we would start the promotions in June, July, with the evaluation in October, council reviewing that in October, November, and then awarding in sort of that December, January timeframe. Now, as part of the things that I want you to think about before I get to the questions at the end are sort of looking at what are our goals for this program. Right now, our grants, they cover an arts program, a social services program, a recreations program, healthcare, and I was trying to figure out exactly what to call the historic stuff, but we'll call it the heritage program. And so, I mean, that's a pretty wide array of things, but you know, we can kind of keep it that way. So as we look at what the goals are, one of the things that you could be saying is, you know, do you just want to say the grant program is to expand the services that are provided in the community with regards to art, social services, recreation, et cetera? Or is that something that you would want to maybe reduce the number of categories that we provide grants in? You could also look at it in a more specific way, that if you, instead of saying that you wanted to provide it
for recreation broadly, you could say, for example, that you want the grant program to fund program recreation projects or something, expand those. That could be the goal of the program. The other thing that you could potentially do is sort of limit it to maybe a service area, saying that, you know, you want the program to improve or expand the services that whichever ones you decide, but that maybe you want it to be in some of our census tracts that have lower income levels, or you could look at doing some of those kinds of changes. I wanted to give you the opportunity to sort of talk about your thoughts so we could try to sum those up and put them into a program, so I didn't go through and list all of those options, but those are some of the ideas. Whatever goals that we end up coming up with, though, need to be able to be measured. And we can continue to work on that based off of what your goals are for the program. But if we're going with residents served, you know, how amount of funding that is leveraged through this, total investment in the community. Bryant, I know that during the budget retreat, one of the things that you brought up is this idea of, does the grant result in some sort of capital improvement to a building or something like that? So we can measure those kinds of outcomes based on what your goals end up being. The other thing that as we put together the program, that we need to look at is what the eligibility is. Currently, the recipients of those grant funds are nonprofits, or you can kind of look at it as like the youth scholarships are sort of to individuals, even though it all goes to one program. But more or less, it's to nonprofits. As we look at the eligibility here, you know, is it your interest that this would only go to nonprofits? Could another public entity, a for-profit group, or individuals submit for the grant? The other thing is sort of this idea of, you know, experience and status. Would we want this to be for an organization that has a lot of experience providing either the services that you want them to provide, or just providing services in general? Are you okay if it was a new organization that came in that maybe didn't have much experience, or, you know, sort of said, if we get the funding, you know, we'll form the organization? I have my thoughts on there, but I just wanted to, I definitely, for myself, would think it would be more making sure that we had a seasoned organization that was receiving those funds, but I want to make sure that you had that opportunity to weigh in on that. The other thing is looking at it from this idea, again, of eligibility, saying, you know, is this a program where we need to make sure that, you know, only Midvale residents are being served? I assume that would be the case. But then also, you know, is it something where, again, if you were interested in doing this in a more neighborhood-focused kind of way, you know, that we can go through and review and weed out's not the way I want to say that, but separate, you know, eligible versus non-eligible programs, if you wanted to look at it more of a neighborhood-focused thing. And then the other thing is, I'm sure there's other eligibility requirements, and I'm interested in your ideas in that, but another one might be, is it something where we want to make sure that this is a unique service that only this provider's doing? Do we care about that? But I'll want to see if you had any specific thoughts on eligibility requirements. And then the other thing is looking at the funding side of things. Currently, we provide $130,000 for these grants. They range from $5,000 to $45,000. So one of the things that we're going to have to figure out, not necessarily tonight on the total program funding, but is that if it were, say, for your example, your intent that you wanted this program to kind of keep the same amount of funding, maybe a minimal amount of growth, then what we're saying is that if we get any more applications than the ones we do, than the grant recipients that we do annually, then what we're saying is, and we'd want to make sure that we're clear to our current grant recipients, is that there's a potential that one of them might not get funding because you may choose someone else. If instead it was in your mind that your thought is that we would keep the $130,000 to make sure that we find a way to continue to fund the organizations that we currently are, but expand the program so that we can fund other organizations as part of this, then that's a good thing for us to know, so that Mariah and I can start thinking about ways that we could get additional funding into the program if it's really about expanding the amount of money that's available in this program. Again, we'll have to get to at some point the minimum and maximum that the program, funding that the program provides. You know, I think that we're probably in kind of a good range right now. one of our concerns is not as much about the maximum, although we have some concern about that, but is making sure that we don't make the grants so small that the amount of work that we have to do is more, costs us, the city, more than what the grant is that we're putting out. So that's something we need to look at. And then at some point, we'll also, based on the goals that you settle on, need to go through and look at the methodology for determining the grant amount, whether that's coming up with a formula based on the criteria that they meet to help us determine what they're eligible for, or if it's just a matter of making it so that the council has the ability to go through and say, I want to fully fund this one, I want to partially fund this one, and that's just what it is. I mean, we can look at it in that way. And then, another thing we'll need to consider as part of this as we get into the details is things like, do we want there to be a matching requirement as part of that funding? So that's just a lot of things I wanted to kind of put out there to give you a moment to or some time to think about before we get to the questions at the end. Again, I look at this as being an ongoing discussion, and we could probably have a follow-up once I get a little bit more details from you today. So the questions are you still interested in pursuing a grant program for us to allocate our grant funding? Because if the answer is no, we can be done real quick.
Do you want the answer to be no? No, I think it's a good program. I think, right now, just for so many years, we've given the same amount of money to the organizations that we give money to. So we're not actively asking people, what are you doing out there? And giving people the ability to come to us in this way so that we can find out some programs that honestly, the 4 or 5, 6 of us might not even know are going on out in the community. I think that's much more beneficial to some of these programs. $5,000 to some community organization might not sound like a lot to us, but it could absolutely do a lot of good, just like handing out clothes to folks who need it. $5,000 can certainly go a long way. So I think we shouldn't just have blinders on and think that, these are the only 4 organizations that need our money. And the more people we can bring into the process, I think, the better. I do have a question for maybe Lisa. Once you start opening these kinds of monies to organizations, then, if we fund one and there's something similar that might have more objectionable content and, we don't necessarily want to fund those, do we open ourselves up to that sort of, well, they gave $5,000 to this organization, they just didn't like what we do, and that's why we didn't get $5,000.
I would imagine that this is, we get to make these decisions, right? It's a little bit different than creating a public forum, and so whether we would consider it to be, I'll let the attorney speak.
No, you're absolutely right. By having a program, we mitigate a lot of the risk with respect to that. Do we open ourselves up all the time anyway? But having a program and having a policy is the best way to protect us. And obviously, anything based on a protected class of some sort. We want to have clear guidance and policies onto who we will consider giving money to. But ultimately, Matt's correct.
So I think the end goal, I like the idea of a policy and a program, blah, blah, blah. Have we had anybody else reach out for grant money, so to speak?
I am struggling right now to think of any other, one example might be like the community garden, right? Like there's not an official organization that exists, someone wanted that service, but there are people that ask for those kinds of funds from time to time. Again, we're treating it, that's a little bit different situation, but I don't recall.
Well, we used to, it's different now, but we used to on the CBC, before the county actually took it over, Midvale, we individually, the council decided who got what. And there was a lot of organizations and a lot of people asked for a lot of money. And I'm sure if we have a program, we're going to have a lot more people ask. Okay,
Yeah.
It could be like, if you build it, they will come thing. I totally get that.
It will.
I just think it's interesting if it hasn't happened.
Well, I don't think it's happened because we really haven't offered it. I mean, we pretty much have it's been always the same people that we've given money to. We've changed the amount once in a while, what we've actually given them. But
Right.
I guess my only concern is like, I don't mind having others. What I do mind is it needs to be, go through the budget and we say, this is how much money we're gonna give before we even know who's asking. And then, if we're gonna have a program, after we've decided it in the budget, then we can go and look and see who gets what. I don't mind that at all. What I don't want is everybody asking before we have the budget, and then we say, well, we need this much money, and so now we're gonna all of a sudden fund all of this stuff.
Right.
I just can't see the government growing that, and I'm sure it'll grow a lot if we do it that way.
Right.
So, and I'm not saying we can't grow it, we need to be aware when we go through the budget that this is the amount.
Right.
And so I prefer not knowing who's asking until I've given the amount, then they can come in and ask, and then we can divide up the budget to whatever we've decided in the budget process we can afford for the city.
Okay.
And if it's 150,000 or if it's 100,000, whatever we can do that year, and one year could be a lot different than another year depending on what we have.
Right.
That's my personal.
Does anyone feel differently than Paul?
I just don't want it to get into like a reality show kind of feel. Like people come in and then we we're like judges whether we like their product or not. I almost see it as like, when these applications come in, I don't think that it's necessarily ones that, we should vote on, like one after the other and like, no. I think it should be a function of city staff and then maybe, come to us with a report of those that applied and the ones that were chosen to receive some grant money rather than, next come on in and do your juggling act for us.
I will say that the county, for their community block grants, they do have, there's a staff recommendation, and then but then the organizations have an opportunity to go and present and say, here's why I'm either thankful for the money you've said that's being recommended, or have the opportunity to say, you didn't recommend my amount, here's why I think it's really critical. But then I think that there's a vote, but all on a slate basis. I mean, I think there can be amendments to that, but it's just.
I just don't want like an America's Got Talent.
And that's exactly what used to happen. Every organization that was asking for money came to the city council and presented why they should get the money.
Let's not do that.
Well, that's exactly, and that's what they're doing. But the staff said, the staff did it first and said, this is what we recommend. Mm-hmm. And then they came in and presented it to the council, and the council either confirmed it or they changed it.
We would never go home.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, go ahead.
I personally don't, I don't know that I agree that it would be a problem for them to come in and make the pitch. I mean, it is part of the hard decisions that we'd have to make from going through this process. But for me, I see this as if we have a ranking system in place based on some of the things that Matt went over. I don't like the idea of saying, oh, you're a for-profit, you can't apply, but I do think we could say, well, if you're a for-profit, then that's gonna get you some points and then narrate.
I definitely would say if you're for-profit, you can't apply. We're a government agency that takes its tax money. The last thing I wanna do is give any money to a for-profit when, like the lady that came in and spoke about her house is probably on a fixed budget. The idea that, she might have to, turn some money over to a for-profit, I envision that these are community goals for like community garden, the arts council, some sort of clothing drive, something along those lines. I can't imagine a for-profit exists in there that we would want to. If you had an example, maybe, but if you're going to ask me here, like, what would you like to achieve? My very first thing I would like to achieve is not-for-profit. It has to be a not-for-profit.
It was just an example.
No, I agree.
I mean, there was, you had public entities on there. I just don't, I'm worried we get ourselves into a situation where we are limiting something that we don't intend to.
I get what Councilman Gettle's saying. When we had the Boys and Girls Club come in, and like, I felt that was a very uncomfortable presentation, right? I don't know if you guys remember, like demanding we use our ARPA funds for their building, and it was a very uncomfortable presentation to the point where I'm like, I don't even want to give them anything because it was so demanding, which, you know, obviously not really how I feel, but I was so uncomfortable at that moment. It would be awful to have like 10 of those.
Well, sorry.
Does that make sense?
Yep, and I think that the way that we resolve having some of the more difficult conversations, or at least reduce the likelihood of those, is to have more specific goals and specific criteria for evaluation. Should help with some of that. If we try to keep it broad, so say for example, right now we provide our grants for those 4 or 5 things. If we just sort of say our goal is to expand those 4 or 5 things, and then we keep our criteria sort of broad, then the only way to make those decisions is for them to come in and present.
Right.
But if we narrow that down, make the criteria pretty specific, that will help so that we're not sort of making arbitrary decisions, but that they're fulfilling the objectives of our plan. So right now what I'm hearing is, yes, a formal program's good. Let's fund it during the budget season and then go through a process of allocating those funds after that. I've heard some, for not-for-profit being one of the things. Does anyone disagree with any of those things so far? I know we're just bringing this up, I haven't discussed it for a while. Does anyone have any thoughts right now on the goals that you would like us to craft the program around to achieve?
So one thing I would like to do with this is obviously sort of grandfather in, for the moment, our current group, right? And then to sort of go along with Councilman Glover's idea and ours generally is like our first year, it's just like we have $5,000 grants or something, right? That way we can test run it to the extent of, that way everyone knows what they're getting into right away, right? Like we're 10,000, whatever, right? Like that's your max amount. That way right away they know, like they can't come in and ask for a new roof. I think that would make some of those conversations less awkward initially, and then we, over years or time, if we grow it or whatever, we can figure out different methods. But that's what I would like, and then try to get different sort of segments of community help, whether it's clothing or dental, or we have an aging population, and apparently hearing aids and glasses and dental work are high on the list of things people can't afford. So I wouldn't mind if we try to target stuff like that, right? Where we have like, $10,000 grant for, a mobile hearing aid, which I recently have heard about, like a mobile hearing aid center that comes to Midvale and tries to, get $10,000 worth of fitted hearing aids or for Midvale citizens or something like that, right? I think that's where we should target it, clothing, food, culture.
I agree with that. I think any sort of philanthropical slant to the program is nice, but also, not limiting it to that, because then you would get rid of the arts counseling. Couldn't.
Yeah, that's right, or culture, kind of culturally driven.
Arts, culture, healthcare.
Arts, culture, healthcare.
I don't know if you're thinking about it this way, Matt, but one of your bullets, in long-standing, have been operating for an amount of time. And that's one I just want to make sure we're careful on. And I don't know if I understood you correctly in that. But just having, because to me it took as like, you need to have a record, show the work that you've done, and then we'll give. And I do think if we're going to go this supporting current ones, at least for now, and then going really small grants. A large nonprofit has, I think it's probably unlikely they're going to apply for a $5,000 grant through us because they can get money elsewhere. But for a really small organization trying to get started, Councilmember Gettle said this, a variation of this, that $5,000 can really go a long way. And so just making sure, and maybe there's a threshold within there that if you haven't operated for however much time, that we would give you up to $10,000. But if you have operated longer, something, but maybe that's a way to think about that, to make sure we're supporting new and upcoming organizations, but not also bankrolling them.
But and for me, the issue is it's hard because there could be a good entity outside of Midvale that could provide a service inside of Midvale. So I would like the end user to be a Midvale recipient, right? So if the mobile, I keep coming back to this because it's just on my mind, the mobile, hearing aid, they could be located in like Spanish Fork or whatever, but the grant money would be, you would come to Midvale or something along those lines, right? Not necessarily looking for a Midvale, because the reverse could happen. It could be like a mobile company located in Midvale, and then we give them grant money and they go down to Spanish Fork and spend, the 10 grand's worth of money. I don't know how much work that is. The idea is the end user should be geared towards Midvale citizens. That's even harder with like the Arts Council, because what if someone from Midvale doesn't come and see the show or whatever, right? But if there's a way just to have that in the policy to encourage that.
This is where I like the ranking. In my mind, the way that I'm thinking about this is you could have, are you an organization that operates out of Midvale, and there's always going to be variations, not always going to be resident, and you're focused on Midvale residents, and then, or are you an organization that's out of Midvale, but you also focus on Midvale residents, and saying, to me, then it would be Midvale organization, Midvale focused is the highest rank, and then you would say not necessarily Midvale organization, but a focus here. And then if you're not a Midvale organization and not Midvale focused, then clearly we're probably not interested.
And I think it needs to have a reporting requirement, right? Like within before, I don't want to keep funding an organization that doesn't provide something to Midvale, right? Like giving either one of those examples so they can prove that it was a benefit to our community.
I'm good with that too.
Just the reporting part, or?
No, I like the ranking. As part of that ranking, it's what's the connection to Midvale, how's it benefiting, and then I like the reporting.
So I want to go back on a couple of things. One is, if we look at the total amount that's currently available, the 130,000, and the organizations that it goes to. I know Brian, you had said they want to grandfather in the current organizations. I could understand why that would be, but it also maybe reduces the ability of the program to make sure that we're providing the resources to the most impactful organizations that are out there. My assumption is that a couple of the organizations that we currently fund, or all of them, would probably be ranked pretty high. But for us to say that our grants are going towards a larger goal or program or something like that, to automatically sort of say that the existing ones are grandfathered sort of negates that. On the other hand, I also recognize that we have a history and why that would want to be the case. I just want to see if everyone else feels that we need to grandfather in the existing organizations.
I don't mind grandfathering in, but I don't want to grandfather them in with the amount we're giving them. In other words, they need to show us that they are worth what we're giving them. So.
Same type of reporting?
Yeah, same type of thing. And each year they need to know that they're coming before us, and we're going to give them some money, but it might not be the total amount. Maybe we'll give them more.
I'm not convinced that right away we're going to see a huge.
We probably won't.
Right. That's why that's why I had that idea. You grandfather them in, and then you do like 10 smaller ones, relatively smaller ones, right? I'm not saying like dollars, to even see what draw we get, right? And then we can revisit it as time goes on, because I would hate to like make the Arts Council and whatever jump through a bunch of hoops, which they should still apply and whatever. we limit them to like 10 grand. We don't really get any other good applicants. So then we all of a sudden have extra money or something along those lines, and then we're trying to like, amend those relationships. That's why I think you sort of a grandfather as a transition until we figure out what we have. Because there could be a ton, there might not be. It's hard to know. That's why I was wondering if we've heard anything.
But you want to grandfather them into like the next budget cycle, not necessarily forever and always.
Like enough to gather data. So maybe a year, maybe two,
Yeah.
maybe three. We might get a bunch right away,
Yeah.
But I would think for this next budget cycle, we grandfather them in. We have the same discussion next August or September, and we're saying like, hey, we only got 3. Then we go, okay, let's just keep grandfathering them in until we get. I don't want to pull back from that. I think it looks bad if we donate less or we have less, money going out that we've always had.
The only thing I would say about that is, there might be some organizations now that we provide money to that we're not necessarily seeing any great return from that money. For instance, I've said it before, the Historical Society, I wouldn't want to necessarily grandfather them in to get money if, they're not able to continue to prove to us that the money that we're giving them is being used in a wise manner. So.
How many display cases do they have?
In
the museum.
In the museum, I don't know what the number of display cases is.
It just feels like they can just be dispersed into some public buildings that are open, like the hair necklace can come here.
Not to pick on them specifically either. I mean, there might be a time where the Arts Council, isn't, producing as much as they are now, and then to say, well, you get 45 grand every year, no matter what.
Which I don't think they would. They ask for it after they put their schedule together.
I guess I'd be really interested to see this conversation in our next budget cycle, because in theory, I'm okay with grandfathering for a minute. But then I feel like in order to actually do anything effective, we'd have to raise. We're at 130,000 right now. I'm thinking, okay, if we win 150,000, raise it by 20,000, and we do 5,000.
A handful of them.
Maybe we get 4 people, but then 4 groups to apply for $5,000 grants, or we can give out 4 of them. But then I also think if we're doing extensive reporting and giving 5,000, then I'm also skeptical. I think we will be limiting it because it just won't be, depending on what we're asking for, and I'm worried that we're going to say, this tiny organization, you need to prove all these things to us for us to give you a pretty small amount. Whereas another organization, understand we have a relationship with them, but we haven't asked for anything. And
Well, I don't think that we would, grandfathering them wouldn't mean they wouldn't have to apply or they wouldn't have to report. It would require both.
I understand that, but it's still it's still, here's the check. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, I just think
But it wouldn't be because you'd have to still apply and still have to report.
But if we're saying we're grandfathering them in, then we're saying you're just having the money anyway. The report could be awful, but if we're grandfathering them in, then we're just handing them the money.
I think Councilman Brown might be just grandfathering them in very temporarily, not like, until all of us are dead and they're still
I'm just not
getting an automatic check every year.
I'm just not convinced we're going to get a ton of applications within I think we might eventually, right? Like you build a grant program, people learn about it. I'm just not convinced that's happening overnight. And budget cycle starts, in 6 months? March, right?
Yeah.
You start putting it together before then? Right?
Yeah, I mean, it really starts in January.
So that's like a couple months away, right? So I just, in my mind, it makes sense to at least, keep them going because, to be honest with you, we have, I think our arts program right now is run very well with a handful of people that they're not going to do it forever, right? And who knows if someone will step up to the plate and want to do, 4 shows a year plus some, bringing in the children's show and whatever, and then maybe they only want to do 2 shows a year, so then it makes sense to not give them the full amount. But in the meantime, they're putting in a lot of work, which I think, if you've ever been to their shows, they're pretty good for the money that they get. And, so yeah, it wouldn't be like a for everything, but I'm also not convinced right away we're gonna get, anything that's,
Just to throw the idea out there, because I don't disagree about the Arts Council. If there was if we could show in this process our intent is to support our existing ones, but then if we had 20 organizations come and apply, it was a lot higher than we expected, but let's say we only budgeted, because I agree with Councilmember Glover that budgeting, let's say 150,000 up front, and then we had a bunch of organizations come out that we didn't expect. If we had criteria in there to say, if we have an existing relationship with you, that is something we want to take into account, but not necessarily a guarantee, because I do think it's this balance. I think you made the comment of, we also don't want to raise that cap and then we can't get rid of the money. But the opposite of that, if
the Arts Council can't function if they don't have the amount we have.
Right.
So if you don't want an Arts Council, that's fine. I mean,
Well,
that's what I'm trying to get out as nice as they can, but it seems to not
and I
be
guess
sinking in.
what I'm trying to get at is like this thing of saying, if the council's goal is to fund art in Midvale and put some other criteria on there, then they should be the organization that likely would be the organization that funded it. But if there happened to be another arts organization that for some reason convinced you and met your goals in a different way, I don't know who that would be, but I mean, then that would be the best use of that funds. I'm fine with I mean, if the group wants to go with the grandfathering, I mean, I think that's fine. I think that
I can't speak for the other, what is it, 5? There's 5? I'm just telling you the Arts Council can't function, and we would lose it, and.
Well, and I think that's the point.
Yeah.
I think everybody realizes that, and they would be funded. I mean, they're a great asset to our community, so why wouldn't I fund them?
Right.
Okay, but if it comes to the point someday they're not an asset to the community, they're just doing a crappy job, which they're not now, then we won't fund them.
Right, and I totally agree with that. That's why I still think they apply and have to report.
Yeah.
But the issue I have is just with the total amount. Like, we can't do 10, can't do 10 organizations for that amount, right? That would be a lot of money.
And we shouldn't, and that's where we can make that decision. And right at the budget process, we're gonna make that decision. We're gonna say, okay, we're gonna fund this year, all we can do is fund what we did last year, because we don't have any more money to do this. Or we've got money and we can put another $20,000 into it, and maybe we can fund some of these other people. I mean, that's a decision that needs to be made. And I all the time I've been on the council, the Arts Council has done a great job, and they've always been funded, and I think they always will be if they continue to do what they're doing right now. And we might even fund them more. I don't think we should be limited.
So I want to, I think I can take what we've got so far to get to
Can you simplify all of
to
that?
get to a proposal. I do want to just make sure I understand one thing. It would be great if I could get two things. Is there a simple way of saying, for this next year, you want, and again, we're going to have more discussions, we're going to go through this, so I'm just to craft something, but lean towards grandfathering existing organizations in, or, and then creating some additional program that would provide these smaller grants, or put them all in the mix, and I'll work from there. Could we just, where are you at on that, Quinn?
I say put them all in the mix. Because like what Councilmember Glover said, the ones that we consider grandfathered, they're probably gonna rise to the top anyway, because we're gonna realize the benefit they provide.
Instead of grandfather, I would just say prioritize them.
Yeah, there you go.
If we've grandfathered you, instead of we're prioritizing to help those that we've already done.
Well, and I think too that the way to prioritize them too is by saying that those are by saying, well, I'll come back to that. I'll work on that. But
Yeah, I think everyone should take a year on the Arts Council. That's just what I think should come out of this, because you would be shocked at the amount of free work we get out of Wade and Stephanie. So it's frustrating. Yeah. whatever.
No, and I agree 100%. I see if anything, we're gonna give them more money if we have it. So I don't think that that's a real problem.
I just don't want them to be all of a sudden like,
Taking the money away, because
right, that just needs to be clear to them, because they, like I said, if they step away without us having a plan, like our free concerts in the park will just go away.
What if we communicated, when this was initially discussed that we were going to start a grant process, was that communicated to these organizations?
No, because
So I let the Arts Council know that there will be an application process and like a reporting process. They're always fine with those things, right? But I will say if we're like, here's 20 grand, opposed to what you normally get, that I think they would just all walk away.
and that's,
I think too, that's.
Would be
a
bad,
ve-
but
That's a
we're-
very good like, I think they would be able to, present their case to us and they would get the money. But, you know, if for some reason they stopped doing it, it would be more difficult for them to.
And they try to come and present and stuff. Out of the other four, I don't know.
They do.
I don't know if I've seen the other four ever present, right?
I feel like they already do this, the Arts Council.
Right, that's what,
And they really have. Every year they've come in and told us what they've accomplished.
yeah.
And the council's always
Yeah.
funded them.
Yeah.
so, okay.
So I mean, it's really not any different than right now, what we're doing. I
Right,
mean,
that's why they don't mind the processes. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I mean-
If we're like, we're gonna equally distribute 140 between 10, but we just might as well take them off, right? Like-
well, I look at it, I think when I got on the council, wasn't it 20,000 we gave them?
Yeah,
And we've increased it.
We've
over
increased
7
it.
years to 40, so.
45.
Because they took on the admin side. So I think that.
yeah,
actually goes to-
they've done other stuff, but we have increased it from what it originally was. And I'm not saying we decrease it, I mean, they're a great organization and they deserve it. And so it's like, and as long as they remain there, they deserve it every year. And maybe more.
So it doesn't in the mix or prioritize?
I think that we could add them to the mix with the very strong suggestion that, you know, recipients from past years can probably expect to be funded again, barring any, you know, huge disasters. And, but the Arts Council, as everyone else has said, I don't see any reason why we would give them less unless we had some disastrous budget year and couldn't afford to give them 45,000 or.
Which they understand that.
And we've gone through that with them
Yeah.
before too. I mean, we've
That's a
had
difference,
years
yeah.
where we're either gonna get rid of employees or we're gonna cut, and we cut and they cut too. I mean, they realize that.
Yeah, it just would be different if they're like, we're gonna try this other up-and-coming arts program that we have no idea if it's even any good, and you're gonna lose money for it, and then we have no arts.
Just a final thought on there for me. I'm comfortable with I prefer the prioritize. I'm comfortable with the grandfather. I guess if that was the route we were going, then I'd prefer it to be, you're getting grandfathered in for 1 year in this process. You have to go through the process with us, essentially. That is, that gives them a year to figure out that process with us, and then saying, but the year after that, again, I expect we will fund them, but it's, at that point, they're on their own.
Well, and Paul, you're in the mix, right? With a little, finding a way to,
I would just prioritize the people that we've given grants before.
And I think we need to say,
They have our priority.
Okay.
And so that if we have the budget to be able to do it, we're gonna take care of it. As long as you come back and report and show us that you're actually providing a service for Midvale, which they've done every year, which any people that we give a grant to, if we take a grant from the federal government, we have to show what we did for it. So, I mean, that's just, but I think if we say to make them feel comfortable, we're gonna prioritize you guys as long as you keep giving us the services that you are. I would hope that they would be comfortable with that. And I'm not saying prioritize for 1 year, I'm saying prioritize.
I mean, the idea of
Throughout.
prioritization makes sense if for any good, you know, whatever, but yeah.
okay. I know we're probably getting a little punched out on this one, but I do want to go back to earlier when we were talking about the goals. The challenge is that if we're if we consider them to be in the program, then we're saying, because they all sort of do something different. And then earlier, there was some discussion about focusing on sort of health, clothing, food, and arts. I guess, does anyone else have any other thoughts on sort of the goals that we want to achieve with the
You
program?
can have those goals, and then once we decide how much budget we can give, then you can say, okay, now we're gonna focus on one of those or one or two or whatever, and then give out grants for what money we have available. If we don't have any available, then it's not above what we're already giving out, and it's really gonna be a moot point.
Okay. Other thoughts on goals?
Can I make a vision joke? I think we really need a nice vision for this to really center around our goals.
The fact that you kind of led with, I need to make a joke about it, like, makes that the best part of that joke. Instead of just,
At least
like,
you got me smiling.
instead of just rolling with it first, for us to get it, that was great.
I'll tell you what, maybe at this point then, unless anyone has any other comments, I will try to take the feedback that I've received and try to put together a scope for what we can do going forward and have something more put together that we can respond to at a future meeting.
Make it simple, please.
That's all I wanted from you guys, but I got all these notes and arrows and everything.
Just boil it down to really simple so that it's easy for the staff to do it. Just make it real simple.
All right.
That's,
I'll have someone else do it, because you guys know me, I don't do simple.
it's not gonna work.
You met, man.
I've already been working on the algorithm up here. All right. Thank you. I appreciate your discussion on this. That was great, and your feedback. And I will work on bringing something back to you.
Thanks, Matt.
Motion to adjourn.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Everybody's asleep.
Okay, I heard a bunch of ayes, apparently. Okay, we're adjourned. Do we need a break? Roll right in? It looks pretty short. I think we roll right in.
Just do it.
Okay. It is 9:10 p.m. Welcome, everyone, to the RDA meeting. Rory, will you call roll?
Yes, Board Member Glover,
Here.
Gettle,
Here.
Sperry, and Brown.
Yes.
Board
I
Member
hear
Robinson.
every time I do that.
Yes.
For RDA. I'm present.
Thank you. Did you excuse Councilmember
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on to public comments. Any person wishing to comment on any item not otherwise scheduled for public hearing on the agenda may address the redevelopment agency of Midvale City Board at this point by stepping to the microphone and giving their name for the record. Are there any public comments? Rory, did we have any online comments?
No, we did not. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. For our consent agenda tonight, we just have one item. Consider minutes of August 23rd, 2022. Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda?
Mayor, I motion we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is second. Any discussion? Rory, will you call roll?
Yes, Board Member Brown,
Yes.
Gettle,
Yes.
Glover,
I was,
Aye.
and Sperry.
Yes, and Brian's here.
That passes. Moving on to our action item of the night, or as Matt likes to say, the action item. Consideration of resolution number 2022-12 RDA confirming artist Bill Lewis for the 2022 Bingham Junction Public Art Project as recommended by the Bingham Junction Design Advisory Board. Hear from Maggie.
Hello, RDA Board. I'm really excited to present this to you tonight. We've selected an artist for the Overstock.com parking garage, which is sort of a gateway between 7200 South and this Main Street area. So it'll be really wonderful to have some new public art there. First, I want to just revisit what the Bingham Junction Public Art Program is. It's to provide opportunities to integrate public art into private developments or public spaces within the Bingham Junction project area. And funding is allocated annually through the RDA annual budget. And this year, for fiscal year 23, our budget is $90,000. For this particular project, it's 50,000. I think this is an older slideshow. That's okay. It'll work. It's required that the advisory board is made up of a RDA representative, city planner, council member, an artist or community representative, and the property owner of the project. And for this project, we had Kate Andrus, Elizabeth Arnold, Dustin Gettle joined us, Ashley Thomas, who owns Echelon Tattoo, and is part of the Main Street Business Alliance as well, and Amber Fairborn, who works for Overstock.com. So a little background about this particular project. So we partnered with Overstock.com to release a RFQ, which is a request for qualifications. This is just getting the qualifications of the mural artists, their background, their experience, their ability to create a project at the scope and scale of this one on time and with high quality. We had, these qualified artists, we asked them to design and install a mural that is aesthetically pleasing, imaginative, iconic, and will be a welcoming feature for our city. So we had 18 applications, and as a design board, we selected 4 to create full proposals around the project's themes of either do good or be you. And those themes came out of Overstock.com's core values for their business, which we thought would be great themes to have represented in Midvale City as well. So the total project budget is $50,000, and the recommended artist is Bill Lewis, who I'll be talking about in just a minute, and the project completion date will be October 15th. Again, the location is on their campus right here on 700 West or Holden Street. Many of you have probably driven by this parking garage. It's going to be wonderful with a new mural on it, not just a big cement feature. So today we'll talk about Bill Lewis and his proposal. He's a Utah-based Polynesian artist, self-described Polynesian artist. His budget for the project is $26 per square foot, which totals $35,490, which we're quite pleased with. And before we look at his proposal, he wanted to focus on do good. And when he met, all the artists were required to meet with Overstock employees and get a tour of the campus and the space to make sure that they were budgeting properly and that they were representing not only Midvale City well, but Overstock.com. So he learned when he was talking with them that they give a lot to underprivileged communities, and he wanted to represent this in the mural design. The various colors and symbology represent diversity and culture, and some of the images include a garden box, which Overstock.com has on their campus, and a lot of images that represent Utah and the Utah landscape. And there's a bluebird. This is kind of funny describing this without you actually seeing it, I'm realizing. But there's a bluebird that represents to be carefree, and a lot of tribal symbolism, which represents family, and he wanted to include, again, a lot of elements that represent Utah. So here is his image. Bill Lewis is a pretty iconic mural artist. It's going to be wonderful to have one of his pieces here in Midvale City. He has a prolific mural career, and he is definitely skilled and would be able to pull this off.
I think it's cool.
In the timeline, and yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
Did the mural from the Sandlot, did that get tagged?
It did.
So that's my only worry. I was under the impression that would happen less, you know.
It's very unusual, yeah, and it's very unfortunate. All Caps, who put on the mural festival, they're working with the artists to fix that. I think they've begun to fix that already.
I just wonder, that's one I want lit. I wonder if lighting helps, right? Does that keep people away?
I don't know about that, but I do know there is anti-graffiti coating that we are talking about applying to some of these larger murals.
Oh, I thought that was already part of the discussion. Did that not go on yet? For this one, we'd want to put it on.
Yes.
Where the proximity to where it's at. And I would also like it lit, but that's just, and they could probably stay out lit longer because it's far from residential and whatever.
Yeah, I wonder if there is lighting here already. I'm not quite sure, but I can find that out. That would be maybe up to overstock.com to do the lighting.
To my knowledge, there's lighting inside the parking structure itself, which probably would provide some light to the mural, but nothing other than just, the normally spaced utility poles, nothing.
Yeah.
But
Let me find out about the lighting. That is an interesting question.
Be nice to have it lit up.
and it is based on its location. Not saying that it would be impossible, but just the layout of this particular wall would make it a little bit difficult to graffiti that particular image because it is set back from the curb and has those barriers at the bottom. So yeah, I mean, someone, if they really wanted to, could, but it's not the easiest wall that we have in Midvale to do.
Were you going to say something, Nate?
I was just going to say, in our Main Street lighting thing, we have in there, part of the scope is lighting some of those murals on Main Street. This one wouldn't be in that, but we could look at lighting this one as well. And then just on the anti-graffiti, some of the ones that we commission, we definitely want to put the some of them have it on it already, and that just makes it really easy to scrub off any tagging. Some of them don't, but again, mural, as we continue to, then some of those part of the mural festival will get painted over. Putting the anti-tagging stuff on there, it becomes really difficult to paint over because
it's doing its job.
Designed not to be. We don't, but coating on.
And those two birds, and beautiful, and we don't want.
And I just wanted this particular artist just blew away. It was the absolute choice. All who were chosen final proposals, but this one just really blew everything and came in, I think, the cheapest proposal as well. So quality as well. For me and some of the other overstock commercial, and specifically had logo, not do good, be yourself, which is there, like a mod. That, it's easy. Make your own interpretation of what the artist is saying rather than, this message brought to you by overstock.com.
Sponsored by.
Yeah.
I like it. I'm good.
All right. I would accept a motion if someone would like to make it.
I feel like it's destined to move.
And the timeline, I'll keep talking about it. The timeline is amazing that he plans to get it done by mid-October. That's 1 month, and it's beautiful. Anyway, I make a motion to pass resolution number 2022-12 RDA confirming Bill Lewis for the 2022 Bingham Junction Public Art Project as recommended by the Bingham Junction Design Advisory Board and entering into an agreement.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I will just add one thing. I was just thinking about the road home being right there and those families so willing to it, and it would be good, I think, of the kids seeing that
that was one of the considerations. You know, Maggie, you did an amazing job getting everyone together on this and telling us where to be for meetings, and those considerations were certainly at the top of the list.
Well, love it. Looking forward to it. Okay, Rory, will you call roll?
Yes, Board Member Gettle,
Yes.
Glover,
Aye.
Sperry,
Aye.
and Brown.
Yes.
Okay, that passes.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?